Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Pitlochry Festival Theatre in Scotland and the new Wolsey Theatre in Ipswich are co-producing a new production of the stage musical Footloose, based on the hit 80s film of the same name starring Kevin Bacon that will celebrate its 40th birthday this year. The production is directed by new Wolsey artistic director Douglas Rintoul and will form part of Pitlochry's rep season from May to September before transferring to Ipswich in October. I spoke to Douglas, together with Pitlochry's artistic director Elizabeth Newman, about the production, but first I asked Douglas about another of his theatre's co-productions, Little Shop of Horrors, which was about to move from the Octagon Theatre in Bolton, where Elizabeth was the previous artistic director, to its final destination, Hull Truck Theatre, and I asked him how it had been going.
Great. Yeah, delighting audiences right across the country. I mean, it's been absolutely brilliant for us because it's been some new co-producing partners. So I've been at the New Wolsey for 2 years now. And I think as an organisation, we were quite reliant on, or very comfortable with, a handful of co-producing partners, and I've just really expanded up the relationships and really all the different kind of possibilities of projects, which is how this project came about as well. Elizabeth and Lottie and I have been talking Lottie at the Octagon and I've been talking for quite a while about doing something together. And then Elizabeth and we've been talking for quite, since I was at the Queen's Theatre as well. And obviously the pandemic, a lot of it's been about rebuilding those relationships actually as well, and sort of following up those desires to collaborate together after the pandemic. I think, I don't know for you, Elizabeth, if you feel it feels it's taken a few years to rebuild those relationships, and actually planning as well, is because we were in cycles of planning where we were talking about making projects 18 months in advance, 2 years in advance. So it really has taken that while to actually get back to that place where we're really thinking about the future and and having those conversations. We were so busy firefighting. There was lots of joined up conversation over the pandemic, but really about how are we surviving? What are we all doing to survive in this moment? And it's taken quite a long time to actually plan ahead. So it's really brilliant to see finally these really, really brilliant projects come to fruition.
So this is a co-production that, like you say, you're a long way apart, about 500 miles apart. So how did you get together?
Well, we've known each other quite a long time, David. What are we at, Doug? 15 years, maybe?
Yeah.
We've first encountered each other. And I think always when you're thinking about co-producing, one of the main driving factors is working with partners who you admire and who share your organisational values. And having known Doug's work for a really long time as an artist and always really admired his work as a director, it felt like a really good place to start, in that, now he's at the New Wolsey. As Doug said, we'd previously spoken when he was at the Queen's, but it just felt like a really beautiful moment to be like, right, shall we try and find something that we can do together? And I think in Pitlochry, we're always trying to make sure that our audience encounters other artistic voices, as well as those of us who are based here. And, it's probably really clear from programming wise as well that Doug and I share similar tastes in lots of ways too, and with stories and how we want to engage audiences. And, what Doug's been doing at the New Wolsey has just been so exciting. If you look at the diversity of the programme, the ambition, the scale, I think you also, as a co-producer, are attracted to people who are being brave and courageous and really working hard for audiences. And that becomes quite a dominant sort of source of decision making, is who is going to love an audience as much as we are. And that is definitely Doug and the New Wolsey team. So I guess that was the reason why we first started having a chinwag.
And this production that is in rehearsal now, that you're collaborating on, it's Footloose, the stage version of a film that celebrates 40 years this year. It starred young Kevin Bacon, who's now the bloke on the mobile phone adverts. But why did you decide to do this particular show then, Douglas?
I think Elizabeth and I were talking about a number of titles, and sort of actually two of them came through, didn't they? And I had seen a production of Footloose a while back and had a great time. And I remember watching it, just being really struck by, so this is a stage version, and I was really struck by the narrative. I'm always sort of really attracted to stories about otherness or being an outsider, because there's always incredible drama that exists in that conflict. And then I went back to the film. Actually, Elizabeth suggested the title, and I went back to the film and just found I was just really excited about how resonant that narrative is still, particularly in a context of sort of culture wars or suppressed youth voice. Yeah, we know it for all the 80s bangers. You know, that incredible soundtrack, which when you look at it, I bought it on vinyl recently. It is which was conceived for the film. Like, it's not a kind of they just plucked hits and packed them together. It was really specifically written for the film, and so it really made sense. It sort of became a stage musical. But it sort of, we all think we know what Footloose is, and because of those incredible songs. And actually sort of going back to it, you go, yeah, there's just great stuff in there we're going to have a great time. We're going to really enjoy going back to that era. But it just became a really exciting provocation to go, let's really go back to that era and really remember what was going on then, because actually it feels quite that it resonates with where we are now. I think it's always amazing, like, to engage with a historical narrative, and it's so funny going Footloose is an historical narrative which is 40 years old. I mean, it really is. And look at our own world through that lens and go, oh, hang on, this stuff is still going on, or we're back in that cycle, and we're going to have a great time. It's really uplifting. It's it's a really moving narrative. You know, how a young person really transforms a whole community. It's such a brilliant story, and the film is incredible, and the musical has all of that joy as well. So I was like, yeah, let's give this narrative some real life again, and really challenge the expectations of audiences around what that story really is. Like, really reconnect them with a brilliant story.
Yeah, because what people remember of things from their youth is not always the reality, is it? Sometimes you have your own memories of something, but when you go back to it, it's quite different. I mean, 1984, I would have been 16, so, you know, that's sort of my era. And not everything from that period has successfully transferred to now, even though the 80s in a style is sort of fashionable in a way. But this... There was nothing sort of dodgy about it that you thought that about the film that had to be changed or that you had to work around.
Yeah, there's a little bit. Well, actually, I think a tiny little bit probably in the adaptation, the musical, I think, and we're sort of leaning into a little bit more what's back in the film. You know, there's some just particular attention around the gender relationships within it. You know, obviously there's no cultural diversity within the film, actually, when you look back on it, which is really, you know, that's extraordinary when you look at it. And, you know, brilliantly, we've got a really great diverse company that reflects the world that we live in. But yeah, there's a bit of, there's a leaning into how brilliantly powerful Ariel, who's the lead character in the film. She has a lot of agency in the film, and you sort of just want to make sure that that's really present in the musical, because there are obviously some of those scenes are missing in the musical, and you just we lean back towards the film to make sure that there's particularly some agency within the female characters as well. So yeah, there's some attention that you have to pay around some of the, you know, some of those narratives and how they today, but there isn't there isn't anything particular. I think actually it was really pretty ahead in its representation of youth voice, and also the representation of women within it. The women are really powerful in that, within a certain, you know, context of a very small town conservative community, the women are strong. They're really, really strong in there.
Yeah, it's a classic story, sort of an iconic story, or an ancient story in a sense of people who are in the conservative, very conservative with the small c values, who are sort of woken up in a sense. Do you want to just quickly summarise what the story is for anybody who's missed it for the last 40 years?
Yeah, there is. Oh, yeah, I don't want to give it away too much.
No.
But there's a central character called Wren who has grown up in Chicago with all of its kind of diversity and metropolitan excitement and deliciousness, who then has to move because of a rupture within his family. So his father leaves. We don't know too much about it, but we know his father leaves the family. And so financially, the mother and the son, so Ethel and Wren, can't support themselves in Chicago. So they move in with a sister in a place called Beaumont in West Virginia, which is small and has itself had a major trauma, which is 5 years before the arrival of Wren and Ethel. 4 teenagers die in a car accident on a bridge, the Pitlochry Bridge, and the car goes into the river and they die, and it devastates the community. And there was a reverend who was the significant leader of that community, and his son dies in that accident. And a number of local laws are put into place, which is dancing is banned. And there aren't particular laws around it, but there are restrictions, or it's frowned upon. Music, rock and roll music, pop music is frowned upon. It's not banned, but it's strongly disliked by the adult population. And so you have a community that hasn't expressed itself through clubbing, dancing, and primarily because it was believed that those young people had been to a club, had taken drugs possibly, or alcohol, and that if a young group of people dance to rock and roll music or pop music, that they will have alcohol and that they will be spiritually corrupt, and bad things will happen to them. And so Wren arrives in this community and obviously is completely shocked and very limited as a young man within this community. And he causes a lot of conflict, and then decides, with the support of other young people who he become his friends, he creates a sense of community, and then quite radically leads a campaign to overturn the laws, and by doing so creates his own sense of community, overcomes his own sense of grief, and also gives a lens to the wider community, a way of seeing what those laws and that conservatism how it's impacted them, and gives them and essentially the reverend in that community gives him an objectivity to see that his conservatism is destroying his community, is destroying his own family, and ultimately it's because he hasn't overcome his grief. So this brilliant story of an outsider who is carrying their own darkness and difficulty and internal conflict enables another community to be able to understand their own pain, and through that it also recognizes his own way of being able to move forward. So he really unlocks a possibility within that community for healing, and also himself. So it's, you talk about it, and it's such a beautiful story, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It's just describing it like that, it sounds like a powerful story, and in a sense, it advocates for the arts as a healing thing as well.
Absolutely. And youth expression, like youth create creativity as well, because that generation, what it says is that generation offers up possibilities for our own growth collectively, because they have a way of seeing it that we probably are losing. It gives us a lens of possibility and innovation as well.
Yeah. Different
ways of looking at things.
Yeah, just made me think of, I don't know whether you saw the first Doctor Who's at weekend, but one of those was about this sort of monster who removed music from the world, and then everybody just destroyed each other because they didn't have music. So,
oh, really? Was it? I did see some of it. Yeah. I mean, it's looking brilliant, Doctor Who, isn't it?
Yes.
It feels really energized. And,
yeah.
And, I think they're really brilliant as a.
So the soundtrack of Footloose, it became quite famous, 80s hits. Was it partly jukebox and partly specially scored?
No, I think all of it was written for the film.
Well, and some of them became hits. So what was some of the hits?
Yeah, 4 of them became top 40 hits. Yeah. So Let's Hear It for the Boy, Footloose. There's the love theme from it as well. I think I can't remember what the other one was, but yeah, there were 4 top. I think it was sorry. Oh yeah. How can I forget that one? Holding out for a hero.
Yeah.
And I think I have to check this, but I think it was the best-selling soundtrack of a film ever. I'm not sure it's even. I mean, it's tricky now, isn't it? Because streaming, you don't really get soundtracks in the same way. Yeah. But it was the biggest selling soundtrack of it, I think, in history.
Yeah, that sort of brings on to the next Pitlochry musical that you've got, which also features some very well-known and best-selling songs. You've got Beautiful, which is the Carole King musical, which has been a massive hit on Broadway and the West End and on tour. And now you're doing a new production of it, aren't you, Elizabeth?
Well, I'm not. Our brilliant associate Sam is, and I was in rehearsals at the beginning of the week, and the end of last week, I should say. All the weeks merging into one with the way our ensemble works, and it's going fantastically. And the brilliant actor Kirsty, who is playing Ariel in Doug's production of Footloose, is playing Carole King, and she is totally and utterly extraordinary. I was sat in the auditorium just as she was doing the beginning, and she started to talk to the audience, as you'll know from having seen the musical before, and I was just like, wow, she is amazing. So I think the audience are in for a real treat. One night seeing her playing Ariel and the next night seeing her playing Carol.
Yeah, that's what's impressive about a season like yours, which I'm not sure any theatres are doing anymore, that you can, maybe the RSC, you can go and see a few productions together with the same cast. But how do you balance a season like that out when you're casting?
Well, we spent a lot of time together, didn't we, Doug?
We did.
Yeah, me and Doug and the other directors, seeing lots of amazingly talented people. And it is a bit like a Meccano puzzle, I would say. But it's a joyful thing to meet so many talented people and work out how you can make different combinations work for different productions. And I think what was brilliant was knowing that we were going to do Footloose with Doug and his team at the new Wolsey, and then knowing that, we were going to do Beautiful, enabled a real synergy between the two productions and the sense of music very much being at the centre of it. And then from that sort of flowed quite a lot of other things, I would say. But it is just a wonderful experience to be, getting to enjoy so many talented people share their skills. And the company that we have this year, we've got 23 in the ensemble this year. 5 of the 23 are opera singers, 14 others are actor musicians in these different productions. Then there are several other people who dance in and out, metaphorically and literally. So it's a wonderful thing. And I think what's brilliant about it is you sort of wouldn't know that they're doing something else when they're doing that thing. You know, that you go, well, that's brilliant, perfect for Footloose. And then you go and watch and say, oh, perfect, that's right, you know. And then you go, oh, well, that's amazing that they're playing all those different sorts of people. You know, it's like Luke, who's playing Wren in Doug's production, is just amazing at playing Wren. And then you see him in rehearsals for Sense and Sensibility playing Willoughby, and you go, oh, you're brilliant as Willoughby. You know, and then you see him in another, you go, oh, well, you're brilliant at that, you know. So, and that's all credit to their dexterity and good humour and talent and all those things.
It's very impressive, though, if you're an audience member. It's great for a place like Pitlochry, which is a holiday place, really, isn't it, where you get people who are going there for the week and they see the same actors. I remember the first time I went with my dad to the RSC, that was 30 odd years ago, and he was so impressed that, you know, an actor that was on King Lear in the afternoon would be then in a completely different play at night in a different costume, you know, saying different lines. And you know, when I came up to Pitlochry last year, somebody who was in Gypsy one day would be in Streetcar Named Desire the next day. Completely different style as well. It feels great. It's impressive, isn't it?
It is. And it is that style and that tone that you're talking about that they so deftly move in between. I also think as well, there's something really inspiring, I think, to just observe people taking on so many different, for me, it's like the decathlon. Like watching artists do the decathlon. And that's incredibly impressive and enjoyable, and it's a really great way, I think, for people to work their creative muscles too. You know, a bit like directors, really. I mean, it's like Doug directed a very extraordinary production of, I'm going to get the name wrong now, of the Patrick Marber play he did, Doug, bail me out of my...
The Red Lion, yeah.
I was about to call it the Red Room, which is an entirely different... The Red Lion. You know, so on the one hand, Doug's directing that, and then in the next breath, he's directing Footloose. And, you know, and it's sort of like with directors as well, seeing the diversity of their work, you know, and what each director brings to it and brings of themselves and their own artistic journey, but also lived experience is a wonderful thing to behold as well.
It's like when you hear some old actors talk about the old weekly rep or 2 weekly rep or whatever, when you're doing a different play every week or every fortnight, you get to exercise plenty of muscles, the same as the director, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. And it is a different thing, you know, directing, you know, a very intimate play in a studio where two people are having a relationship breakdown is very different to, you know, directing, I can't think of a title now, but, you know, West Side Story, where you're giving it the clicks, you know. I think it's just a very, very different thing.
Yeah, you mentioned Sam Hardy's directing beautiful. I saw her direct a three-hander in your brand new studio last year, and this is a completely different prospect, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And she's just such a wonderful artist and human being, and
yeah.
She's not dissimilar to Carol with her level of spirit and love.
So what's the story of Beautiful? It's the story of Carole King, obviously, but I'm not sure her story was particularly well known before the show, was it?
No, well, I think there were parts of Carol's life that were known before the show, but they focused on a really particular period, which is the forming and the breakdown of her marriage to Jerry Goffin, who she very famously wrote a lot of her hits with in the beginning bit of her career. And from what I understand from the different documentaries and biographies, etc., it was very hard for her, the creation of the musical, because it's, you know, it's got some hard bits in it. And for those people who haven't seen it, it spans from Carol being in her teens to her late 20s playing at Carnegie Hall at 28 or 29, I wouldn't say. But it's got all of the classics in it. I mean, Doug loves it as much as I do. You know, it's got all the songs that you go, oh, she wrote another one. Oh, it's another hit. Oh, it's another hit. Oh, I didn't realise that was Carole King. You know, it's got that in it, you know, and lots of people go, oh, I don't know much about Carole King. And you will then go into one of her songs and they go, oh, wow. So I think it does that. It does that for people, and the musical spans sort of 2.5 decades of music as well. So you're getting different styles, different genres, different artists. You know, you do get to meet the Drifters, the Shirelles, you know, which is part of it. And I think when you know it's a true story, that biopic thing, I see it have a really particular, profound effect on audiences, you know, when they know that they are watching, you know, a real life story. It's a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, because there've been plenty of biographical jukebox musicals in the past, some better than others, but the better ones tell a stronger story, don't they? Like Jersey Boys and like Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being in Bolton and we did Piaf. Do you remember, David, when we did Piaf?
I do, yeah.
Amount of letters of complaint we got for saying that wasn't Piaf's life, she wasn't like that, blah, 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 blah. And me having to be like, oh, I'm really sorry, but she actually was. You know, there was sort of a real sense of reverence for her and her music, etc. And it was a real shock to the audience to find out that content about Piaf's life. And I think sometimes there are surprises within, you know, when you look at, because in the musical, what it really highlights is Carole King's lack of self-esteem as a person. You know, her brilliant sense of belief in her work, but, you know, her endlessly thinking that she's not, well, pardon the pun, beautiful enough, you know, and you're sat there thinking, she's mad. She's amazing. But, you know, that in itself is really moving, that you could be confronted with somebody who you so profoundly believe is so beautiful that has that level of self-doubt is I mean, I've often seen that with great performers, and you both must have come across it many times when they go on stage and just, you know, they've got the audience to the palm of their hands and then they come off and say, was that all right? Yeah, totally. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's most people in the theatre industry.
Yes, probably.
To be honest.
But she seemed to have that, you know, you ask a lot of songwriters, hey, how do you write a hit? And they say, well, if I knew that, you know, I could make a fortune. But she had it. She just seemed to be able to do it, didn't she?
She wrote the truth.
Yeah.
That's what she did. And the audience connected with her truth. What she did, which I think is, you know, what we're all aspiring to do. But I don't think as many people have achieved it in the same way that Carole King has.
And I think that's an interesting thing. Just going back to Footloose, it is based on a true story. So when we go, oh, that's an extraordinary story, it is based on the same thing. It's based on a truth. You know, why do these narratives resonate with audiences? Is because quite often there's the truth. There's always something incredibly surprising in and unexpected, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I think that's why Footloose is so powerful as well, is because it is based on something that happened.
Definitely.
Yeah. So how do they balance together? You put them together in a season. Apart from the casting, how do they fit together in a season? Is there something that you're thinking of when you're putting these together with the rest of the program?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're very different musicals.
Yeah.
And they've got very different content, and, you know, one is about youth culture, as Doug was saying, and oppression. The other is about a woman coming of age and becoming a mother and a wife and so they're very different. But I think what both of them have in common, which is always the one of the check things you're trying to do when you program anything, and I'm sure Doug feels the same, is they both have great integrity. So I'd say that's what they have in common. But with regards to the musical genre and the stories themselves, they are magically different.
Well, both could well have the audiences going out singing the songs.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they're still going in singing, David, never mind coming out.
What else is in your season, Elizabeth, that in the rep season?
So we're doing Footloose, we're doing Beautiful, we're doing Sense and Sensibility, we're reviving Shirley Valentine, we're doing a new Scots and Gaelic opera of Dido and Aeneas in our amphitheatre, also reviving The Secret Garden because that was so successful last year. we're doing 2 brand new plays in the studio. One is the Brenda line about the heavy breather callers and Samaritans, and the Brendas, who were the people that answered the phone to them on that whole period in history. And the other is a new play about Nan Shepherd called Nan Shepherd Naked and Unashamed. So it's kind of 8 very different pieces playing in rep. And then after that, we move on to The Sound of Music at Christmas.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that as well. Why did you choose The Sound of Music? Because that's another one of those shows that unfairly, I think, is thought of as being a little twee, but, you know, it's about escaping from the Nazis, isn't it?
Escaping from the Nazis, yes. And it's also about overcoming or coming to terms with grief and loss of the mother, of learning how to love your children fully and without limit. So, learning how to be a family. It's about massive themes. We're doing it because it's one of the most beautiful musicals of all time. And I've been trying to get the rights for years. And finally there was a window and I was like, right, we're bouncing. Just because I think right now, if ever there was a moment to tell the Sound of Music story live on stage, it's now, for all of the political reasons that we know, but also because that sense of what music can do. I think maybe someone said to me, on reflection, what do you think this year, one of the things that this year is about? It is about what art and music can give you. Carole King, beautiful, all that is about what music can give you, what it gives that woman, what it gives the audiences. The same with Footloose, what moving, dancing music gives those young people. And with The Sound of Music, it's actually learning about music. The children learning about music actually brings their family back to life. It does. It really does. It's what captures something in the father that makes him remember the father that he was able to be when his wife was alive. And the fact that he's now confronted with this woman who's just so full of music, who can't stop herself from singing in, the nunnery, that gets herself in trouble because her body is just flowing with life, and music becomes the kind of the manifestation of being full of life, I would say. So, yeah, why not would probably be another answer to the question.
And the way you describe it, it does sound very much like what happens to the Reverend in Footloose, doesn't it, Douglas?
Yeah. And again, another true story.
Yeah.
True story. Yeah, maybe that's the funny thing.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I think those, it is extraordinary, isn't it, what that family went through and what so many families are going through now. This is not something that's in our past fully, is it? But I think this is a very good way to have that conversation. And I think The Sound of Music possesses that capacity to have that dialogue with an audience. Yeah,
because we don't think of people escaping from the Nazis quite in the same way that we think of people doing the same thing now. We don't refer to them as asylum seekers, for instance, do we? Because that's exactly what they were, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, totally, they were. And I'm really hoping that audiences will come away, especially at that time of year, really feeling moved about the piece, but what it is also speaking to in the world that they're in now, definitely, because it was made in the 60s, so it was always trying to be a piece of learning and allegory, and it wasn't made in the 30s. So yeah, and it's just a beautiful celebration, isn't it, of fighting to stay alive and to live.
Yeah. So, Douglas, what else have you got coming up in Ipswich or elsewhere?
We're already in preparations for panto.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which is great. So we have a brilliant writer who started writing for us last year, Vicky Stone, who's a brilliant musician, comedian, writer of musicals. So I've just received draft 2. Yeah, it's great. It is, it's such a beautiful moment in obviously the busiest moment for the theatre, but when the whole of the community come together and ensuring that that extraordinary, joyful experience is there for everybody. So yeah, that we're in that crafting stage at the moment. So that's great.
And what have you got leading up to that?
Well, Footloose comes to us, which probably sits right in the middle of autumn. And then we've got some really exciting stuff. So we do a mixture of producing and visiting work. So we've got a big new production of Midsummer Night's Dream in the summer, which is all of our youth theatre. We have a really, really strong cohort here that started working on that. And then we have After the Act, which is a new musical around the experience of Clause 28 from a fantastic company called Breach. So we do, we're musicals, music in theatre is a very, very big part of what we do. So we try and really ensure that we have lots of different ways of how that is manifested, and some really innovative ways, particularly with new musicals coming through as well.
Elizabeth, have you never thought of doing panto? You never did them at Bolton, and I don't think you've done them at Pitlochry, have you?
Well, in Bolton there was one at Albert Halls.
Yeah.
So it felt a bit mean to put one on in ours. So we always tried and made it different. Okay? But in Pitlochry, they don't sell as well, David.
Oh.
So what our audience love more than anything is a festive musical. Hence the reason of doing Sunshine Leith last year, Sound of Music this year. So, yeah, I think it's important that, they've got panto at Perth, which is about half hour up the road. And I do think as well, Doug probably has this with his audience and talk more passionately and clearly about it. Because I don't know for certain, but I get the sense from other people that in theatres, people have been going to that theatre for decades to see their panto, and it sort of gets handed down the generations. So I think it's quite hard to announce yourself as a panto place when you haven't established yourself in that way in someone's life, because I'm pretty sure that someone will go and see the Perth panto and still come and see our festive musical, or go to Edinburgh or Glasgow or wherever. So I think it's about Pitlochry offering an alternative or an addition to that too.
Yeah, I think, Douglas, that's probably true of regional theatres as opposed to, the big touring theatres, that they do have like we used to have one at Oldham that's unfortunately closed down now. Every year the same people booked the same seats. They come to see the panto and they book for the following year immediately. Do you get that as well?
Yeah, we definitely do. Yeah, there's a big rush when we go on sale for particular performances. Yeah, there's obviously a whole tradition for families. Yeah, it's very loved. We've been doing a rock and roll panto for the last 23 years. So it is a real actor musicianship is a really big part of our identity here, and it's very loved. So I took over directing it last year, so which obviously is really terrifying. You have this moment, this very, very loved thing. Fortunately, I directed that to Museo of Pantos at the Queen's Theatre, which I used to run before, so I sort of knew what I was doing. But it's a real responsibility and a real a privilege to hold those audiences, but also ensure that you're generating new audiences, because if you're not generating new audiences, then they're not going to be there in the future. You have to keep. The thing I love about panto, and I think even for the audiences who do know what the traditions are with panto, is that always with a company and in the making of it and the writing of it is go, let's just not presume that everybody knows what the form is. And also, where are the surprises in it? It's just ensuring we're reimagining it for new audiences all the time, so it doesn't feel like an exclusive club that everybody knows.
Yeah, and play with the form a bit,
and play with the form, and tell the story. It's got to have the all this conversation we've been having about Footloose and Sound of Music. Tell a great story. And what is that story? And then, of course, it breaks out and all the additions to it. But ultimately, we want audiences, it needs to feel life-affirming, and really, you can go on a journey that they're in a different place at the end of seeing it than they were when they first came in. Yeah, that's...
After 23 years, I'm sure they'd let you know if you got it wrong, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they would.
And finally, co-productions. We seem to... I don't know if it's just my impression, but we seem to be seeing a lot more of them since COVID. I don't know if that's a financial consideration. On the one hand, it does allow you to put on these bigger productions, I suppose. It makes them more financially viable. But there is an argument that perhaps it's reducing choice for audiences if they're sort of touring within a similar region. So what's your take on co-productions at the moment? Douglas, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, they do many things. Yeah, of course, they're sharing resources is really brilliant. And we're not in the best climate in terms of financially, in terms of funding, public funding, which is, in real terms has reduced quite significantly over the years. It is, a great way that we can ensure that we can bring those events to our theatres. It does also mean that we can balance it out and then we can take some real risk in. So one thing I didn't mention, we've got a really brilliant, it is a co-production with a regional theatre very, very close to us, where we're producing a new play by an Ipswich playwright, a very hard-hitting, extraordinary play by Martha Loder called Bindweed. Very hard-hitting and really, asking big questions around masculinity in the contemporary society. But it means doing Little Shop of Horrors, sharing all those resources, bringing those big events to our audiences means that we can really take the risk in those other new contemporary works and supporting local audiences. I think the other thing is you just, when you're working in co-production, you learn things because each organisation might be uniquely an expert in one dimension of delivering that production. So we're not working in silos. It means I think it forces you to be more ambitious, particularly around the quality around it, who you're working with. So you don't just fall into the same patterns of making work with the same people. It gives you a really unique lens on the piece that you're making by working with another organisation. So I think we become healthier organisations by working in partnership as well.
Elizabeth, you've always been very much a collaborator. You've always talked quite a lot to other companies. Have you noticed a change in the number of co-productions?
Yeah, I think it's increased, but I think it was increasing before the pandemic, David, to be honest. Right. And I think it's for all the reasons that Doug has said. I do think it's useful to mix up who you're working with and how close they are to you and all that sort of stuff, and to sort of be really specific about when it works to do it in collaboration and when it works to not do it in collaboration as well. I think there are some things that are best served just being, really focused on what you're making, it being very specifically about home, which is why Doug's new play that he's talking about with Martha is with a venue near them, is because it's about that playwright being from that area.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. There are going to be I'm writing an application at the moment, which is for a consortium of East Anglian theatres. And that's for us to make work that's really specifically resonant for our audiences here in East Anglia, and taking sort of unearthing really inspiring East Anglian narratives. And that will be in a kind of consortium or kind of co-production, but that's very, very specifically resonant for our audiences here. So you can, and that, those theatres that we're working with and the theatre that we're working with on Martha Loder's play is only 15 miles away. And we work very closely with the Theatre Royal Bury St Edmunds, which is only half an hour away up the road. But we actually, interestingly, here in East Anglia, certainly there's very little crossover between our audiences.
Yeah.
But that may not be the case, and that's different in different regions. So we're very, very mindful at not replicating work that might cross over, that might split audiences across. But there's a kind of environmental lens on it as well, is that actually giving the audiences the opportunity to see work locally as well.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, which is, so there are but you're right, there are moments where that's not right to co-produce. And we have to, it goes back to Elizabeth's very first point, which was it's all about audiences. And so the right partner, if it resonates with our audiences in one place and, 500 miles apart, which is what we are, and it does, and the values are right, our values are shared, and the same inquiry and curiosity around audiences exists, then that's sort of right. Sometimes it's just not right to co-produce with a particular organisation on a particular project.
That was Douglas Rintoul, Artistic Director of the New Wolsey Theatre and Director of Footloose, and Elizabeth Newman, Artistic Director of Pitlochry Festival Theatre, who will be directing The Sound of Music later in the year. Little Shop of Horrors closes at the Octagon Theatre in Bolton on the 18th of May and then moves to Hull Truck Theatre from the 22nd of May to the 8th of June 2024. Footloose will run at various times and dates in Pitlochry's season between the 31st of May and the 26th of September before transferring to the New Wolsey Theatre from the 3rd to the 26th of October. Beautiful, the Carole King musical, will run at Pitlochry between the 7th of June and the 28th of September, and you'll be able to see The Sound of Music there between the 15th of November and the 22nd of December. Sleeping Beauty, the new Wolsey panto written by Vicky Stone, will run from the 22nd of November 2024 to the 18th of January 2025. For more information about Pitlochry Festival Theatre and its upcoming productions, see pitlochryfestivaltheatre.com, or for the new Wolsey Theatre, see www.wolseytheatre.co.uk.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.